Hi, everybody. So welcome. I'm so excited to have some folks join us today for the webinar on 5 Keys to College Admissions Victory. I'm Erica Cole Gillette. I'm the founder of Writing Rockstar, and I have such exciting stuff to share with you today that I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. We've been chatting here before the webinar got started about where everybody's from and what everybody's concerns are. So everyone should be seeing my screen right now, and this is how to get into a great college without getting overwhelmed. The first thing I want to do is take a quick poll so I can just get a little bit of a better feel for where everybody's at. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, or say hello, in fact. So, hi. So, like I said, I'm Erica Gillette, and I'm the founder of Rockstar Academics, which is my business where I consult with families to help them get through the college admissions process and help the high school students identify their dreams and the best college for their family. And then we work to get them in. So I just wanted to say hi. I'll be here behind the slides as we go along, and but I want to give you guys a full view of what we're looking at. So I'll come back to say hi in a second. So anyway, I wanted to do a quick poll, and so I can see who's here, and also so that you guys can see who else is here. So my first question is, I'm going to actually set up a poll so we can see the answers. And what I want to know is, do any of these descriptions sound like you? Do you or your family feel overwhelmed and bewildered by all the different checklists and books and websites that are out there about college admissions, and it just feels like there's no way you can figure out where to get started? So if that's you, either select number 1 on the poll or just put it in the chat. Or how about this one? Do you feel frustrated and you really just want someone to tell you exactly what to do and when to do it? A lot of busy families feel this way because the project is so huge. Or perhaps you feel uninformed about the process and you don't really know what colleges want to hear from your student or how to help them make good decisions about the process. So select number 3 if that sounds like you. Or perhaps the biggest pain that you're feeling right now is that you feel disorganized about the process and you really would like someone to help you set up a plan to get it all done on time. Many families feel worried about this process and about finding the right school where their student can be successful versus just the school where they may be able to avoid unnecessary debt. And one of the things that makes me happiest in the world is when I can help a student find a place where they have both, so they can be successful and avoid unnecessary debt. So select worried if that is the thing that keeps you up at night. And finally, a lot of families tell me that they're confused about what is the most important thing to do to prepare for this college process. So if you are a family that has a student who's not a junior or senior yet, but you are here and you're interested in what to do at the sophomore year or the freshman year, let me know if that's you. I'll tell you, I'm going to leave the poll open for a few more minutes, but it doesn't surprise me that word overwhelmed is one that I hear more often than anything else. The word overwhelmed, it's a word that I hear all the time. I hear it from students and families. And I put this slide up and I always feel like I want to emphasize that this is a very negative slide. And that's one of the reasons I started this business, is because I don't want this to be a negative process. I want to be able to help students and families manage these feelings and instead feel joy and excitement and curiosity about the process. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to close the poll. I'm going to move on because I have so much good stuff to share. Oh, well, there we go. Okay, so here's where we are. I'm going to move quickly at some points, and then at other points I'm going to slow down. But quickly, I just want to share where we're going to go right here in the next half an hour or so, and what you will be able to learn if you stay with me until the end. So the biggest thing that I'm going to share with you right away are the 3 biggest mistakes I see that close college doors for seniors, and I think they'll surprise you. We're also going to talk about when is the best time to get started on the process, and I'll tell you that it's probably not when you think. And then the next thing we'll talk about is how to ensure that your application or your student's application is first in line for critical opportunities like scholarships and athletics and other things that have a time limit on them. So that's where we're at. So this is 5 Keys to College Admissions Victory and how to get into a great college without getting overwhelmed. So let's talk about mistake number 1. Mistake number 1 often surprises families. Many families wait until after junior year to get started. So if you are able to put in the chat, I'm really curious to know how many families here have students who are in the end. We're getting to the end of junior year right now, and I'm wondering how many of you have already gotten started on the process. So the truth is, I see a lot of families, and I especially used to see a lot of families who would not think about the college admissions process until they go back to school in the fall in September for their senior year. And then that's when they're starting to ask the questions and put the list together. And of course, it's not too late to get the process done in September of your senior year, but in many, many ways, it's too late to have the time to really do it well. And so that is a pretty huge mistake that can affect your results really dramatically and affect where you end up once the other end of the process is finished. So I'll give you a case study. I had a student a couple of years ago, and the family, they came to me in actually November, and the school had really not given enough guidance to that student to let him know that he should have really been getting started and looking at his college list long before Thanksgiving of his senior year. And this kid had excellent grades, and he had really high test scores, two things that are really, really important. But he had waited so long that it was really, really a heartbreaker. He had a lot of anxiety and disappointment. He wasn't able to apply to many of the schools that he cared about because he just didn't have time to get organized. So if he'd started sooner, it could have been a really different story. So mistake number one, we'll come back to talk about the answers to these mistakes in a second. But mistake number one is definitely waiting until after junior year is completely over to get started. So what about mistake number two? Okay, so this is one of my favorites. I often get a lot of really strong reactions to this mistake in both directions. Mistake number two is letting the student handle the process completely on their own. And here's the deal. This is why this is a problem. I get a lot of families who say, but my student is going to be at college in just a few short months. Surely they can handle this process all by themselves. And besides that, and I'll give excuses, or I'm very busy or whatever. And in a certain way, of course, this process needs to be directed by the student, but, your student is still a student, and letting them handle it here's the problem. Letting them handle it on their own can get really overwhelmed. There are books and websites and videos to watch, but it's up to that student to get it all done. And it's up to that student to make all the judgment calls on what's the best path to take. So many families wrongly believe that the student is really well prepared to get through the process and answer, the many essay questions in the best possible way and understand how to share their experiences well. I get a lot of students who wrongly believe, and this is the example that makes this point. I get a lot of students that come to me and they say in the first couple of minutes of our meeting, well, I don't really have any extracurricular activities, and because that's a major piece of the application course. And the students say, well, I don't have any extracurricular activities, or they can't identify which of the extracurricular activities they've had are important enough to share on the application, or they will share the extracurricular activity, but they don't know what's important about that activity to share. So they don't know how to explain that, playing on the basketball team gave them leadership skills. That's the important thing, or something like that. So, it's really important to have a guide helping your student make those good decisions. And that's what I mean by not letting the student handle it completely on their own. Yeah. Well, let me tell you this case study really quickly. So I did have a student one time who came in, and we sat down, and he said to me, I don't have anything to talk about when it comes to extracurricular activities. I don't really have anything to write down. So I'm actually pretty good at really getting to know a student and finding out what they're interested in. So I sit down and I'm talking to him, and I find out, he didn't have any resumes, so I'm guessing, right? But I find out eventually that this student has attended 2 huge events for adult leaders. This is not a high school thing. This student is such a powerful leader within his community at 17 years old that he's attended these major nationwide summits for adult leaders. These are summits that, CEOs of companies go to learn leadership, and that he's received several scholarships and a leadership award from Tony Robbins himself. And then as I keep digging, because I now have a clue that this student is really exceptional, I also find out that he has spent the last year, all of his junior year, he spent working with the city and the school district to design a program that was going to give shelter to homeless teenagers. Successfully designed this program and was about to implement it for real in his community. And this student had come to me and said, I don't have anything to talk about. So this is what I mean by making sure a student has a guide, because those kinds of things are so important to share, and sometimes students just don't know. Okay, so what about mistake number three? Mistake number three is waiting for the high school to help be the guide. So a lot of families will say, of course I'm not letting my kid do it by myself, but I know that there's a guidance counselor at the high school, and I'm sure they're handling the process. And the high school is handling the process to a certain extent, but the high school guidance counselor is not necessarily an expert in college admissions. And even if they are an expert in college admissions, that's actually not the majority of their job. Most high school guidance counselors spend less than 20% of their total time thinking about college admissions and counseling high school juniors on their college admissions process. And they, in other words, spend 80% of their job doing other things, social work and helping kids schedule classes and all these other things. And so managing this process is really the student and the family's job, and not that guidance counselor's job. And like that student I told you about in November, waiting for the school to make sure it's getting done on time can really actually result in disaster, even though the school is doing the best they can, even doing a good job, but is not going to necessarily catch all of the potential problems that may come up. So, here's the deal for both of these things, actually all three of these mistakes. This is the most expensive decision that a senior in high school has ever made. It's probably also the most expensive decision that he or she is going to make until he or she buys their first home, right? College costs, the average cost of a 4-year degree is somewhere around $180,000, right? So I talk to a lot of families and I say, yes, of course your student needs to be driving this process, but you wouldn't just hand him $20,000 or $30,000 and send him down to the used car lot to pick out a car. Right, you definitely would make sure someone was going with him to help him make a good decision with a decision that expensive. So I think that's a really good analogy. Okay, so let me ask you this: if I told you that it could be different, would that be good news to you? It can be different, and I have the joy of helping it be different for a lot of students. So I want to just tell you a little bit about me. This is not my favorite part of the presentation, but I know it's important for you to know a little bit about me. So I'm Erica Cole-Gillette. I'm the founder of Rockstar Academics. I have a background in higher education for more than 10 years and a background in education generally for the last 20 years. So I help students find and get into the colleges of their dreams. That's what I do full time now. And my clients come to me for help with the application process. And along the way, I help them turn that process into an opportunity for growth and help them clearly articulate their accomplishments in their essays and their personal statements. This is actually a little outdated now. It's not 18, it's 20 years of experience as an educator. I also have a career as a professional writer and editor, and that's my favorite part, by the way, of the process. So I just want to share how this happened. How this business happened for me. When I was teaching college students, which I started out as a faculty member. It broke my heart every time I'd meet a student who didn't have a good reason to focus and really excel in their classes. And what would happen is each year a certain number of students would land in my art history class, which was my research discipline. They land in my art history class because they were sort of sightseeing, trying to find something that would interest them. And I would call this a commitment. Either they had no commitment to their major or they hadn't even chosen a major at all. But they'd heard that my classes were sort of interesting. So they'd show up in my class and think, why not? But then by the second or third assignment, I could tell that this student, had lots and lots of skill. They were a smart kid, but they clearly didn't have the motivation. They really weren't dedicating themselves to the work in my class or probably to any other class. So after the third or fourth week of the semester, I'd invite a student like this to have a cup of soup in the cafeteria, and I'd ask them, honestly, like, hey, what the heck are you doing? You're buying such an expensive college education, and you don't have any serious goals in mind behind it. And I'm from Texas. I tend to be pretty blunt about it. And if that conversation went well with the student, which it almost always did, I would sit down and help the student come up with a course that would help them to be successful and set goals. But, in the background, the idea that students could make it all the way through a few years of college, because I didn't teach a freshman class, right? That students could get all the way through a few years of college, paying all along. And it would take they'd get all that way before a well-meaning humanities professor like me would finally sit down and ask them to think about what they really want. The idea that that was true over and over again, really, frankly, it just made me really mad. And so after a couple of years of it, I really decided that I wanted to try and change it for students. And that's where the idea for Rockstar Academics came from. So that's a little bit of background on the problem as I ended up seeing it, and as you may end up facing it if you if you don't have help. To be honest. So I want to go back and really get myself off the screen there, but let's see. I'm going to go back to where we're going with this presentation. So I shared with you the 3 biggest mistakes that close college doors for seniors. And now I want to talk a little bit about when is the best time to get started in the process. And this is, we've already talked about that a little bit. We talked actually about the mistake of waiting until the beginning of senior year. So really, where is the best time to get started? So here's a timeline that I share with my clients, and we talk about where is the best place to get started on this timeline for your particular family, because this is really what the process looks like for the student, even if they don't realize that they're in this process as early as sophomore year. Really, in sophomore year, it's important for the family, if their family's thinking about college as a real goal. And, guys, keep in mind that, somewhere between 20 and 50% of American high school students apply to college. So there are other really great options for a family. But if the family is thinking about college as the likely goal after high school, in sophomore year is the right time to start talking about what that goal looks like and whether or not the student is really intending to play athletics seriously. That needs to be started really early, and also to look at the extracurricular activities that the student is doing. All those things to make sure that they are leading towards the college goals the family has in mind. And then that's sort of after the end of sophomore year. Those are conversations that we have during the summer after sophomore year. So, for example, right now at this time of year, I'm talking to families whose students are about to finish their sophomore year and talking about what we might want to do during that summer, this upcoming summer before their junior year, that can help them out, right? So we've got summer break. I've got summer break that might include summer camps and enrichment camps and skill building camps, coding camp, for example, doing internships and things like that in the summer between 10th and 11th grade. And then we talk about junior year. In junior year, that's, for many of you, junior year, I see most of the people on here are getting to the end of your junior year. So of course you've already taken the ACT by the end of your junior year. Most students take that in the spring of their junior year, so February, March, they're taking the ACT or the SAT for the first time. In your junior year, you will likely meet with a college advisor like me, or the college advisor that works at your school, or the guidance counselor if you don't have a college advisor specifically. And then junior year, especially after Christmas, is also the time to start looking at different kinds of colleges and what kinds of majors are interesting to you, and even doing campus visits. All those things, really, the right time to do that is at the end of junior year and in the summer, upcoming summer. So that upcoming summer that is right around the corner for those of you who are juniors right now, that upcoming summer is really, really the key time. And right this minute in the spring of junior year is a time to be planning that summer. So if you are setting up college visits for the summer, you want to be setting those up now while school's still in session at the colleges. If you are hoping to play athletics, to play sports during college, if you are hoping for Division I or Division II recruiting, you most likely have already talked to athletic scouts at those schools. But if you're looking at D3 or D4 schools, this upcoming summer between junior and senior year is the time to make contact with coaches at those other kinds of schools. And then, of course, the application process, which I'm going to talk about next, is a huge project. And working on that, all of that work, the essays and the lists and the extracurricular activities and all those things, working on those things in the summer is really the way to get a good result, because once school starts in September, man, those essays and everything else have to compete with AP classes and athletics and prom and all those other things. So upcoming summer is really a crucial time. And then, of course, the earliest college application deadlines are before Thanksgiving. So that's one of the reasons why it gets really hectic in September. So that's really the first key, in fact, to the process, is getting started early. So why? Why do we have to start so early? I get this question a lot, right? Because it's just a bunch of forms we'll fill out in September. Well, test scores, ACT, SAT, SAT subject scores, and AP scores, but primarily ACT and SAT scores are the number one factor that determines admission. Everything else is important too, or we wouldn't talk about paying attention to it, but those test scores are at almost every school the number one factor. So why does early matter for test scores? Well, if you take the test and you'd like to get a better score and you would like to prepare and take it again, you need time to do that preparation. And ideally, you need time that doesn't compete with the application process itself, and that doesn't compete with all those other things that I just listed, right? So getting started in junior year and getting a good read on your test scores and how much preparation you need to do there leaves you time to do it in the summer. Also, the most competitive deadlines for really elite schools, those are the earliest deadlines as well. So if you're thinking about applying to a private school or even a school that's competitive, the earlier deadlines Ivy League deadlines are very, very early. Applying early decision happens in November as well, which is a way to get an edge in really competitive application process. And so in general, the more competitive you are planning to try and apply, the earlier you're going to have all the pieces done. And getting your applications in early, sometimes it does matter, and early decision definitely can matter. Early application, early decision admission rates are as much as 3 times higher than if you apply on the regular deadline. So just to give you an example, what that means is Stanford is, for example, definitely has this issue, as do most of the other Ivy League schools, right? So if you apply early decision to Yale, your application is 3 times more likely to be admitted than if you send the same application 2 months later with the regular pool. And I talk in much more detail about all this stuff in my private coaching and in my group programs, and I can explain why this happens. But basically, the essential fact is, if you're applying to a competitive school, you need to be prepared to get it done really, really early. And there are a couple other reasons here too. A lot of other opportunities are determined early, like scholarship applications and program participation, and especially for NCAA athletics is really done before junior summer comes around. Decisions are really getting close to being made. So those are 5 great reasons to get started early, right? So let's look at the finish line. Starting in sophomore year in 10th grade and really going all the way through until junior summer is the time to be really doing as much exploring as a student can. So that's that top line. You see, that's a long process. And if we don't start that process until junior summer or even the beginning of senior year, there's not time for the exploration. It just means that line gets compressed or completely eliminated. And that's the essential piece that is what gets the student in a sightseeing class in their sophomore or junior year of college, and they still don't know what they're doing, right? So that's how that looks. And then even starting as early as the end of junior year, students really should be thinking about essays to look at the bottom line. So these are processes that take time and to do well. Okay, so having said all of those things, I'm curious to see if you put in the chat which of these things that I've just talked about do you and your family need to kickstart the most? Have a look at this list and let me know. I'm always curious to know what are the things that really seem like families are worried most about, whether it's the tests or doing the research or having the time just to get all of the pieces done. Yeah, I'm seeing Michelle says getting all the pieces done on time. Like a lot of people do say that, right? I mean, that's why That's why families usually reach out in the first place. Okay, so here's the second thing. And this is also a really valuable piece. These are the pieces of the application package. And understanding all the different pieces that go into the package as early in that process as possible is also a way to get a head start and really kickstart the process. So these are all the different pieces that you and your student are going to eventually have to assemble, right? It's a lot. And what I see a lot of times is families don't get started until September because they don't know that there are this many pieces of the process involved, right? So most everybody knows they have to send test scores. That's that big orange box. And most everybody knows that grades and transcripts matter. But the funny thing is those two things are the things that you can least control by the time the end of junior year comes around. Your grades and your transcripts, by the time junior year comes around, it's going to be hard to move the needle a lot on your GPA, right? And you can move the needle a lot on your test score, but that's just one thing. All these other things are things that you will need to complete in between junior year and November of senior year. So you've got a personal statement, and honestly, students who are really serious about applying, I have students who are writing, at least 15, sometimes 20 different versions of essays and short answer questions. That's a lot of work, right? And in addition to that, of course, there's an activity list that really looks a lot like a resume, and talking about all of that stuff well. You've got recommendation letters that have to be requested and directed. That process has to be directed as well. And all these other things, they really do take time. So these are all the different pieces. And in order to do all these pieces well, you really want to leave a good amount of time. So this is where we are. I think we actually are on the next one now. So let me ask you this: why am I sharing all of this information, and why do you need to know all of this stuff, right? Well, because if you don't know all of this and you don't get started on time, I had a student last year. This very last year, I had a student who ended up having to call his science teacher, his biology teacher, on Christmas Eve and say, I know that you're not checking your email because you're on vacation with your family, but I really need this recommendation letter, and I need it before, January 31st, right? And this is not really an ideal way to get a really flattering recommendation letter, right? So you have to get started. So if you're a parent and you back there when I said mistake number 2 was letting the student handle the process on their own, and you were thinking, I don't have time to handle this process. The student's going to have to do it on their own. This is a real piece of data that has been collected last year, that parents, more than a quarter of parents spend 10 hours at their desk at work each week working on this college application process. And it's a huge chunk out of their work productivity, right? And then the stress that goes along with that too. So it is really, really essential to get a handle on the process early. So this is why I'm here, right? If you can get all these pieces done in the right order at the right time, with enough time left over, you can dramatically reduce the workload. So if you do them in the right order, then you have the information in the right place when you move on to the next step, right? And that means you'll have more time in your senior year to spend with your family and enjoy that senior year before he or she goes off to college, right? So I'm pretty passionate about this part, in fact, because I think doing it right and then creating an environment for a successful and joyful senior year is really important. Okay, what's next? I do want to go ahead and open the question and answer window in case anyone wants to go ahead and add questions that I can answer at the end. Yeah, I see a few questions. Okay. So if you'll do me a huge favor and share with me so I can collect a little bit of data and tell me which of these pieces is likely to be the most work for you and your family based on where you're in the process, whether it's the tests or really focusing on good grades or the writing of dozens of essays, like Michelle had said earlier, the just getting all the work done. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. So I'm going to open it up for questions in a second. And I really appreciate those of you who have stayed till the end. Like I promised at the beginning, if you stay till the end, I will share the timeline and the checklist that I have that families use to get through this process easily. So if you stay till the end, I'll have your email address, and you'll just receive a link where you can download those two things. But let me ask you this before we go to questions. What what are you thinking that you might need right now? Now that you've heard all of this and it's just rapid fire, it's almost like a fire hose of information. I know it's so much to cram in, but just hearing this overview of the process, I'm just wondering what you may need right now. And now that you know what you need to do, and um, why it's a really big deal to get all this stuff done, do you feel like you need more clarification or personal attention? Or are you just really wondering, how am I going to get my family through this? And is it possible to have some assistance to actually get it done? And of course, yes, I am here. And what I want to offer you is that if you would like some help figuring out what you really do need next, I would be delighted to chat with you. I've opened up some spots on my calendar in next week to be available to hop on the phone and help any of you map out a customized plan. I guess I really wish that you guys could see me. Um, so as I say all of this, right, I'd love to hop on the phone and help you map out a personalized plan. So if you are interested in that, you're going to, you can actually visit rockstarstrategysession.com and rockstarstrategysessions.com. I'll put it up here in a second, and I'll put it in the chat as well. And you can go there and fill out this really quick application and snag one of the spots on my calendar so we can sit down and find out what's going on. Because I know this presentation is a lot of information, and sometimes just in 45 minutes, I can, in no charge, it's complimentary, right? But just in 45 minutes, we can diagnose trouble areas for a family and find out where they need to be focused, or even identify what kind of things they should be looking for when they start to build their college list. And sometimes we can even put a plan together for the family so they can get it all done with less stress. So go ahead and fill out the application at rockstarstrategysessions.com. So let me answer some questions now, if anybody has any, and then we'll go from there.